They say Christmas is the season of giving. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the most valuable gift you can receive is the truth about where you actually stand in someone's life. I learned that truth on Christmas night, sitting at a dining table in a house I technically owned, watching my son and his wife hand out presents to every single person in that room. Every person except me. My name is Carolyn Blake. I'm 70 years old, retired, and I've been a widow for 6 years now. 4 days ago, I sat at what was supposed to be a joyful family Christmas dinner and discovered exactly how much I mattered to the people I'd sacrificed everything for. But before I tell you what happened at that table, I want to ask you something. Christmas was just 2 days ago. How did yours go? Was it everything you hoped for, or did something happen that left you feeling hurt or invisible? Maybe you're listening to this right now while you're cleaning up leftover decorations, or sitting in your car, or lying in bed trying to make sense of your own family drama. I want you to drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what you're doing right now. Tell me how your Christmas went. Was it beautiful, or was it complicated? Because what I'm about to share with you is about the kind of Christmas that looks perfect on the outside, but leaves you feeling empty on the inside. And if you've ever felt like you didn't matter at your own family gathering, I need you to know you're not alone. Go ahead and hit that like button if you're ready to hear how one quiet word and 4 days changed absolutely everything. And please subscribe, because this story has twists you won't see coming. The house was packed that night. My son Nate and his wife Kim had been bragging for months about hosting their first big family Christmas. "We're doing it right this year, Mom," Nate had told me back in October, his voice full of pride. "Finally feels like we have a real family home, you know? A real family home." That phrase stuck with me, especially since it was built on the equity from the little house I'd sold when I retired. But Kim never mentioned that part when she posted photos of their beautiful kitchen or their spacious backyard on social media. I'd spent most of Christmas Day in that kitchen, my back aching from standing at the counter. No one makes sweet potatoes quite like I do, or so Nate always says. I didn't mind the cooking. It kept my hands busy, gave me a purpose. That's what mothers do, right? We find ways to be useful. By the time dinner was over and the dishes were pushed aside, I was ready to sit down and just enjoy the evening. The table was crowded with faces. Kim's parents sat near the head, laughing at something Nate had said. A few of their church friends filled in the middle seats. The kids' piano teacher was there, a sweet woman who always remembered to compliment my pies. Even Carla was still there, the young woman who comes every Friday to clean their house, sitting quietly in her plain work polo near the end of the table. Then Kim stood up and clapped her hands together. "Okay, everyone, time for presents." She pulled out this enormous gift bag. The kind you see in holiday commercials, tied with ribbons and stuffed with tissue paper. She looked like she was hosting some kind of glamorous event, her smile wide, her voice bright. "Mom," she said, turning to her own mother first, sliding a box with a designer label across the table. "You are going to absolutely love this." Her mother opened it with a delighted gasp, pulling out a cashmere scarf. They hugged. People clapped. "Dad," Nate said next, handing Kim's father a long, narrow package. "Something for the golf course." More laughter, more toasts with wine. The kids squealed as they tore into their gifts. Gaming controllers for my grandson, a smartwatch for my granddaughter, brand new sneakers with lights in the soles. Then Kim reached back into the bag and pulled out a small envelope. She walked it down to the end of the table, right to Carla. "This is for you," Kim said warmly, handing her a gift card tucked inside glittery paper. "You work so hard for us. We appreciate you." Carla looked genuinely touched. "Thank you, Mrs. Blake," she said softly, her cheeks flushing. "That's very kind." I smiled at her from across the table. "You've earned it, honey," I said. "Those bathrooms alone deserve hazard pay." Everyone laughed. Kim beamed, clearly pleased with herself for being so generous. I waited. There were still boxes in the bag. I could see the shapes of them through the tissue paper. My name hadn't been called yet, but I wasn't worried. There was always something for me. A scarf, a book, a mug with some jokey grandma phrase on it. It wasn't about the value of the gift. It was about being remembered, about being seen. Kim pulled out another small box, checked the tag, and handed it to the pastor's wife. Another box went to the piano teacher. Then she reached into the bag one last time, turned it upside down with a little flourish, and shook it. Tissue paper floated down to the floor. She laughed. "Oh, that's it, I think." The room buzzed with thank yous and the sound of wrapping paper being crumpled. Chairs scraped against the floor. People leaned over to admire each other's gifts. I sat there, hands folded in my lap. "Kim?" My voice came out steady, maybe too steady. "Did one maybe slip under the table?" She turned to look at me, and I saw it. That little flicker in her eyes, like she'd been waiting for me to say something. "Oh," her lips curved into a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Did yours not arrive? That's so strange." She snapped her fingers, as if suddenly remembering something amusing. "Oh, right. The tracking said there was some kind of issue. Your gift must have been." She paused for effect, misplaced in transit. She shrugged, already turning back to the others. "You know how these shipping companies are during the holidays." Across the table, Nate was watching me, just watching. I saw the moment where he could have stepped in, where he could have said, "Kim, don't be ridiculous. Of course Mom has a gift." He didn't. Instead, he smirked. Actually smirked. "They'll sort it out, Mom," he said, lifting his wine glass like we were toasting something. "Probably New Year's delivery. We all know you're patient." A few people laughed. Not loud, but just enough to sting. Even Carla looked down at her gift card, embarrassed, turning the envelope over and over in her hands. They were waiting for it. I could feel it in the air. They wanted the awkward grandma moment, the protest, the tears, the fuss, the scene they could talk about later, shaking their heads and saying, "She's so dramatic. You know how older people get about these things." But something happened inside me in that moment. Something went very still, the way water goes flat and quiet right before a storm rolls in. I folded my napkin, set it carefully beside my empty plate, and looked at Kim. "All right," I said. That was it. Just that one word. No quiver in my voice, no pleading, no explanation. Kim blinked. Just once. That wasn't the line she'd been expecting. The pastor's wife tried to smooth things over. "Carolyn, your pies were absolutely incredible tonight." I smiled at her, genuine and warm. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm glad you enjoyed them." Then I stood up. "I should get going," I said. "I like to drive before it gets too late." "But Mom," Nate said, and he actually sounded surprised now. "We were going to do family photos." I looked around the table at all those faces. Kim's parents, their church friends, the piano teacher, even Carla, still clutching her little envelope. "You've got plenty of family here," I said quietly. "Looks like a full picture to me." Nate's eyes narrowed, trying to read me. Kim had already pulled out her phone, scrolling, like I was a commercial break she had to sit through. I kissed my grandchildren on their heads. "Bye, sweethearts. Text me pictures of your new toys later, okay?" On my way to the front door, I passed through the kitchen one last time. I heard voices behind me. Low, but not quite low enough. "She'll get over it," Kim's mother murmured. "She always does," Kim replied. "Besides, maybe next time she'll remember not to embarrass us." There was a sting behind my eyes, sharp and hot, but I pushed it down deep where it belonged. Outside, the cold December air hit my face. I walked to my car alone, my hands perfectly steady on my keys. They thought they'd given me nothing that night. They were wrong. They'd given me permission. 4 days later, those same people were standing outside my condo door, pounding so hard I thought they might break it down. Their voices cracking with panic as they begged me to let them in. But by then, I'd already done something they never saw coming, and there was no going back. The pounding started at exactly 3:17 in the afternoon. I was standing at my stove, stirring chicken soup, when I heard the first heavy thud against my condo door, the kind of knocking that makes the frame rattle. "Mom, please, you have to open up." Nate's voice, louder than I'd heard it in years, desperate in a way that should have made me rush to unlock the door. It didn't. I turned the heat down under the pot and wiped my hands on a dish towel, listening. Kim's voice cut through next, high and shaky. "Carolyn, please, we're sorry, okay? Just open the door. We need to fix this today. It can't wait." I glanced at the clock again, right on schedule. Then came the lighter knocking, Small fists against wood. My grandchildren. Grandma, Daddy says we have to talk to you. Please open. That part, I'll admit, made something twist in my chest. The part of me that used to jump at anyone's discomfort, that used to soothe and fix and smooth over every rough edge, wanted to rush to that door. But the new part of me, the one they'd built carelessly over years of taking and taking, just set the spoon down on the counter and took a slow breath. They had finally read the letter. They had finally understood what it meant when I signed my name at the bottom. 4 days. It had taken them 4 days to realize I wasn't bluffing. 4 days ago, they couldn't be bothered to give me a $5 scented candle. Now they were at my door, voices cracking, begging like their entire world was collapsing. What changed? I walked slowly toward the door, my slippers quiet on the tile floor. I could hear them shuffling out there, whispering urgently to each other. Fragments of sentences filtered through. She has to listen. What if she doesn't answer? Mom, come on, we know you're in there. I stopped a few feet from the door, arms crossed, just listening. The 4 days since Christmas had been the quietest stretch I'd had in years. No sudden requests to babysit. No texts asking if I could pick up groceries for them on my way over. No calls from Kim, wondering if I could just pop by to let the repair guy in while they were at work. Just silence. At first I thought maybe they really hadn't noticed. Maybe the letter got buried under their holiday mess. Maybe they assumed it was another one of those official-looking envelopes they could ignore. But then the texts started. The first one came the morning after I mailed it. From Nate. Did you send us something? Kim says there's a weird letter with your name on it. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, another one. Mom, call me when you get this. We need to talk. I turned my phone face down and went to water my plants. By that evening, Kim started texting too. Sweet at first, like she was trying to coax me out of hiding. Hey Carolyn, just want to make sure you're okay. You left Christmas kinda suddenly. Hope we didn't upset you. Hope we didn't upset you. As if she didn't know exactly what she'd done. I deleted it. The next day the messages got sharper. This isn't funny, Mom. Whatever you think you're doing, we need to discuss it like adults. You can't just ignore us. We have kids, we have responsibilities. Call me, right now. I didn't call, I didn't text back. I just sat in my quiet condo, drinking tea, watching the winter light move across my walls. For the first time in years, no one was demanding anything from me. No one was assuming I'd drop everything to meet their needs. No one was taking my time, my money, my energy for granted. It felt strange at first, almost uncomfortable, like a sweater that doesn't quite fit right. But then it started to feel like something else. Peace. On the third day, I got a voicemail from someone I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Hello, this message is for Carolyn Blake. This is Jennifer Ramos from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. We received notice that the property at Parker Lane will be listed for sale. We need to coordinate regarding the transition of ownership and updated contact information. Please return this call at your earliest convenience. I saved the voicemail and played it twice, just to hear the way she said, transition of ownership. It sounded so official, so final, so real. That same afternoon my phone rang again. This time it was the real estate agent I'd met with quietly a week before Christmas. Straightforward man, named Robert, who didn't ask questions when I told him I wanted to know the market value of a property I owned, but didn't live in. Miss Blake, just following up. The photos are scheduled for this Friday. Does that still work for your timeline? Yes, I said. That works perfectly. And you're certain about moving forward? I only ask because, well, it's family property. I want to make sure you've thought it through. I looked around my small condo, the walls I'd painted myself, the bookshelf I'd assembled with my own hands, the kitchen where I cooked meals just for me, on my own schedule, without anyone critiquing or taking credit. I'm certain, I said, by the 4th day the panic must have fully set in. Because that's when they showed up at my door. Now, standing in my hallway, I could hear Kim's voice getting higher, more frantic. We can't just stand out here all day. What if the neighbors see? What if the neighbors see? Even in crisis, she was worried about appearances. Nate knocked again, slower this time. Deliberate. Mom, I know you're upset. I know we messed up at Christmas, but this is too much. You're talking about kicking us out of our home, our kids' home. You can't do that. You wouldn't. Our home. That phrase again. Funny how it was only their home when it was convenient. When they wanted to host parties. When they wanted to brag to their friends. When they wanted to post pictures online showing off their big, beautiful house and their big, beautiful life. But when the property taxes came due, it was my house. When the roof needed repairs, it was my house. When the water heater broke at 2 a.m, it was my house. And when I needed to be remembered at Christmas, when I needed to feel like more than a checkbook with a pulse, it wasn't anybody's house at all. I was just invisible. I reached for the door chain, then stopped. 4 days earlier, they couldn't be bothered to pretend I mattered. They'd handed gifts to every person at that table. The piano teacher, the church friends, even Carla, the cleaning woman, got a gift card and a speech about how much they appreciated her hard work. But me? The woman who'd sold her own home so they could have theirs? The woman who'd stood in that kitchen all day making sweet potatoes and pies and enough food to feed a small army? I got a smirk and a lie about shipping delays. Now they were here, desperate and frantic, because they'd finally realized that the person they'd been treating like furniture had the power to move all the pieces off the board. "Carolyn, please," Kim called through the door, her voice breaking now. "We're begging you. Just let us in, let us explain." I stood there, hand on the chain, feeling the weight of that moment. They wanted to explain. They wanted to fix it. They wanted me to open the door, let them in, let them apologize just enough to make this go away so their lives could go back to normal. But to understand why I wasn't opening that door, to understand why their panic had come 4 days too late, you need to know what they had forgotten. You need to know what I still owned. And you need to know the truth about the house they called theirs, but never really paid for. When Nate sat at my kitchen table and looked at me with those hopeful eyes, asking for help with a down payment, I made a decision that changed everything. I just didn't know it yet. 3 years ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, my son sat at my kitchen table and told me about a dream. "Mom, we found it," Nate said, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen since he was a kid, showing me a good report card. The perfect house, 5 bedrooms, huge backyard, right in the district with the best schools. It's everything we've been looking for. Kim sat beside him, scrolling through photos on her phone, tilting the screen so I could see. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, a kitchen island big enough to seat 6 people. "It's beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "There's just one problem," Nate continued, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was nervous. "The interest rates right now are brutal. The bank says if we had a bigger down payment, we'd qualify for a much better mortgage. We'd save thousands over the life of the loan." He paused, glancing at Kim, then back at me. "We were wondering if maybe you could help us out. Just with the down payment. We'll handle everything else. The mortgage, the taxes, all of it. And when we get our promotions, when things settle down, we'll pay you back. You know we're good for it." Sitting in the kitchen of the little house where I'd raised him. The house his father and I had bought when Nate was just 2 years old. The house where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we'd weathered storms and arguments and makeups. I'd been a widow for 2 years by then. Retired for 1. The house felt too big for just me, too full of memories that made the silence louder. "How much do you need?" I asked. Nate's face lit up. "Honestly, if we could get about 60,000, that would change everything. That would get us the rate we need." $60,000. I didn't have that kind of cash just sitting around, but I had equity. The house was paid off. The market was good. If I sold, downsized to a condo, I could free up the money and still have enough left over for myself. "Let me think about it," I said. Kim reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We would be so grateful, Carolyn, and you'd always have a place with us. Always. Your family. We take care of family. We take care of family." Those words echoed in my head for days. I thought about how much I wanted to be close to my grandchildren as they grew up. How much I wanted to be part of their lives, not just a voice on the phone or a face at obligatory holiday dinners. 2 weeks later, I listed my house. It sold faster than I expected. A young couple, with a baby on the way, fell in love with the backyard, the neighborhood, the charm of the place. I signed the papers in April, packed up 30 years of my life into boxes, and moved into a 2-bedroom condo on the north side of town. The condo was nice, quiet, low maintenance, but it wasn't home. Not yet. In May, We all sat in the loan officer's office for the closing on Parker Lane. Nate and Kim could barely sit still, grinning at each other, whispering about paint colors and furniture arrangements. The loan officer, a woman about my age with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, walked us through the paperwork. "Given the structure of this arrangement," she said, looking directly at me, "with Miss Blake providing the full down payment and remaining financially responsible for the property, the title will stay in her name. Your son and daughter-in-law will make monthly payments to you through this family limited liability company, but legally, Miss Blake, you are the owner." She slid a document across the table, pointing to a specific paragraph. "This clause here allows you to terminate their occupancy with 30 days written notice, for any reason. It's standard for family lease agreements like this, just to protect all parties involved." Nate waved his hand dismissively. Yeah. Whatever the paperwork says, it's basically our house. We'll refinance in a couple of years once we're more established. Right, Mom?" I looked down at the line she'd pointed to, 30 days written notice, for any reason. "Right," I said, signing my name. Kim leaned over and hugged me. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to us. The kids are going to have the childhood we always dreamed of giving them." We all smiled for a photo outside the house that day, standing on the front porch with the keys in Nate's hand. Kim posted it online with a caption about dreams coming true and feeling blessed. Nobody mentioned my name in the post. Over the next 3 years, I learned what "we'll take care of you" really meant. It meant calling me when the air conditioning unit died in July and asking if I could cover half the replacement cost, since, technically, it was my investment too. It meant Nate showing up at my condo with a quote for a new fence, explaining how it would increase the property value, hinting that I should contribute. It meant Kim texting me photos of a fancy outdoor grill, the kind with the side burners and the rotisserie attachment, saying Nate really needed it for his work events, for networking, for his career. Each time I said yes. Each time I told myself it was an investment. In the house, in their future, in my relationship with my grandchildren. Each time, the promise of "we'll pay you back" got a little quieter, a little more vague, until it disappeared altogether. The monthly payments they were supposed to make, they came late more often than not. Sometimes I'd get a text. "Hey Mom, things are tight this month. Can we skip this one? We'll make it up next month." Next month never came. But I didn't push. I didn't want to be the nagging mother, the one who keeps score, the one who makes everything about money. So I stayed quiet. I stayed helpful. I stayed convenient. Until Christmas night, when I came home from their dinner, my stomach still empty from the meal I'd cooked but barely eaten, my heart even emptier from the gift I never received. I hung up my coat, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the hall closet. On the top shelf, behind the Christmas table runner, in a box of ornaments I hadn't used in years, sat a weathered blue folder. Parker Lane, closing documents. I pulled it down, sat at my dining table, and opened it for the first time in over a year. The pages were crisp, official, covered in legal language and signatures. I flipped through them slowly until I found the section the loan officer had pointed to 3 years ago. There it was, clear as day. The owner reserves the right to terminate occupancy of the property with 30 days written notice, delivered via certified mail, for any reason deemed necessary by the owner. For any reason. I read that line 3 times, letting each word settle. For years, I'd treated that clause like it didn't exist, like it was just a formality, something on paper that would never actually matter. But sitting there, in the silence of my condo, still tasting the humiliation of that dinner, I realized something. It mattered now. For the first time since I signed those papers, I wondered what would happen if I actually used it. What would happen if I stopped being the woman who swallowed every slight, who funded every request, who stayed quiet so everyone else could stay comfortable? What would happen if I reminded them that the house they called theirs, the house they forgot I owned, was never really theirs at all? I closed the folder and set it on the table in front of me. Outside my window, the world was dark and quiet. Inside, something was waking up. That night, I sat at my dining table with the blue folder open in front of me, a cup of tea going cold at my elbow. Christmas dinner kept replaying in my mind. Kim's smirk, Nate's silence, the way everyone else got a gift, down to the woman who scrubbed their toilets, while I got excuses and awkward laughter. But the more I sat there, the more I realized Christmas wasn't the problem. Christmas was just the moment I finally stopped pretending not to notice. I picked up my phone and started scrolling back through old photos, old messages, old memories I'd tucked away because it hurt less not to look at them too closely. Last April, my grandson's school play. He'd been rehearsing for weeks, practicing his lines in my living room every time they dropped him off for me to watch. He was so excited to be a talking tree in the spring musical. "You'll come, right, Grandma?" Keith asked, his little face so hopeful. "Of course I'll be there," I promised. I wouldn't miss it. The day of the play, I got dressed early, drove to the school, sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes trying to figure out which entrance led to the auditorium. I finally called Nate. No answer. I called Kim. No answer. I walked into the main office and asked where the spring play was being held. The secretary looked at me, confused. "The play was yesterday afternoon," she said gently. "Are you thinking of tomorrow's talent show?" "Yesterday." I drove home in silence, my hands shaking on the wheel. That evening, Kim posted photos on social media. My grandson in his tree costume, branches taped to his arms, grinning at the camera. The caption read, "So proud of our little performer. Family came out to support him." Family came out. I wasn't in a single photo. When I called Nate the next day to ask what happened, he sounded distracted. "Oh man, Mom, I'm so sorry. We got the date mixed up. It was a crazy week. You know how it is." He didn't offer to make it up to me, didn't suggest maybe I could take my grandson out for ice cream to celebrate. Just moved on like it was a missed dentist appointment. I told myself it was an honest mistake. Then there was my birthday in June. They came over for dinner, which I cooked, of course. After we ate, Kim handed me a small wrapped box with a bright smile. "Happy birthday, Carolyn. Hope you love it." I opened it carefully. Inside was a nice scented candle, the expensive kind from that boutique shop downtown, vanilla and lavender. "This is lovely," I said, genuinely pleased. "Thank you." Later that night, after they left, I was putting the candle on my bedside table when I noticed something stuck to the bottom of the box, a small piece of paper, folded and tucked under the price sticker. I pulled it out and smoothed it flat. It was a gift tag, the kind that comes with wrapped presents, and it was already filled out in someone else's handwriting. "To Janet, with love from the book club ladies. Happy retirement." I read it twice, just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Janet, whoever that was, Kim had given me someone else's gift. A candle that had been given to another woman, probably one of Kim's friends or coworkers, and somehow ended up in Kim's hands. Maybe this Janet person had passed it along to Kim. Maybe Kim had received it at some event and didn't want it. Either way, Kim had wrapped it up, put a bow on it, handed it to me with a smile, and never bothered to check if there was an old gift tag still attached to the bottom. She'd re-gifted my birthday present, and she hadn't even done it carefully enough to hide the evidence. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding that little card in my hand, and told myself it didn't matter. It was the thought that counted, right? Except there hadn't been any thought. Just convenience. Then there was the night in September when Kim called me, her voice tight with stress. "Carolyn, I hate to ask, but we have an emergency. My mom fell and we need to get to the hospital right away. Can you come watch the kids? I know it's late, but we really need you." "Of course," I said, already grabbing my keys. "I'll be right there." I stayed with my grandchildren until almost midnight, put them to bed, read them stories, made sure they brushed their teeth. I didn't mind. Family helps family in emergencies. The next morning, I saw Kim's social media post, a photo from the night before. Her and Nate at a poker table with friends, drinks in hand, big smiles. Finally got a night out. Thanks to our amazing village for making it happen. Her mom hadn't fallen. There was no emergency. They just wanted a free babysitter so they could go play cards. When I asked Kim about it the next time I saw her, she laughed it off. Oh, Mom got better really fast. False alarm, but since you were already coming over, we figured we might as well take advantage of the break. You didn't mind, did you? I minded. I minded being lied to. I minded being treated like hired help instead of family. But I smiled and said, no, of course not, because that's what I always did. I smiled. I stayed quiet. I made it easy for them to use me, sitting at my table now, looking at all these memories lined up like cards in a deck. I could finally see the pattern I'd been ignoring. I wasn't cherished. I was convenient. I wasn't loved. I was useful. And the moment I stopped being useful, the moment I needed something from them, even something as small as being remembered at Christmas, I became invisible. My phone sat on the table beside the folder. I picked it up and scrolled to a name I didn't call nearly as often as I should. Lydia, my older daughter. The one who lived in Colorado with her husband and 2 kids. The one I saw maybe twice a year, if that. We weren't distant because of any fight or falling out. Life just got busy. She had her world out west. I had mine here. Our phone calls were less frequent than they should have been. But when we did talk, there was something different about it. Respect. I pressed her name and waited while it rang. Mom? Her voice came through warm and a little surprised. Hey, is everything okay? It's kind of late there. I'm fine, I said. Then I stopped. Actually, no. I'm not fine. There was a pause. I heard her moving, probably stepping away from wherever she was to somewhere quieter. What happened? So I told her. Everything. The Christmas dinner. The gifts for everyone else. Kim's line about the package being lost in transit. Nate's smirk. The way I'd left early and nobody had called to check on me since. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. Mom, Lydia finally said, her voice low and tight. Are you telling me that they gave a gift to their cleaning lady but not to you? Yes. The woman who cooked the entire meal? Yes. The woman who sold her house so they could buy theirs? I closed my eyes. Yes. That's not just rude, Mom. Her voice cracked with anger. That's cruel. That's deliberate. I don't think they meant to be cruel, I started, but she cut me off. Doesn't matter what they meant. What matters is what they did. And what they did was humiliate you in front of a room full of people. They made sure everyone saw that you don't matter to them. Hearing her say it out loud, hearing someone else name what I'd been trying not to feel, made something break loose inside my chest. I don't know what to do, I whispered. Yes, you do, Lydia said firmly. You know exactly what to do. You just need permission to do it. What do you mean? Mom, you have the right to protect yourself, even if the people hurting you share your last name. Especially then. We talked for over an hour. She asked questions I'd been afraid to ask myself. When was the last time they'd done something kind for me without needing something in return? When was the last time they'd called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time I'd felt genuinely valued in their presence? I didn't have good answers to any of those questions. As we were wrapping up, Lydia said something that made me sit up straighter. Mom, that house, the one they live in, it's still in your name, right? I looked down at the blue folder. Yes. Then you have options. You know that, right? You're not stuck. You're not powerless. You own that house, not them. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time. I pulled the folder closer and found the clause again, the one about 30 days' notice, the one I'd signed 3 years ago and then forgotten about because I never imagined I'd need it. For years, they forgot that line existed. I had too. Until now, the morning after my call with Lydia, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee, sat at my dining table with the blue folder open, and pulled out a blank piece of paper. For a long time, I just stared at it. Writing this letter meant crossing a line I could never uncross. Once I put these words on paper, once I signed my name and dropped it in the mail, there would be no pretending it was just a passing frustration. No laughing it off. No smoothing it over. This was real. I picked up my pen and started writing. The first draft was angry. I wrote about every slight, every dismissal, every moment they'd made me feel small. I wrote about Christmas dinner and the re-gifted candle and the school play they'd forgotten to tell me about. I wrote until my hand cramped and the page was covered in words that tasted like vinegar. Then I read it back and crumpled it up. That wasn't the letter I needed to send. That letter would give them ammunition. They'd call me bitter, emotional, unstable. They'd twist my hurt into proof that I was overreacting, that I was being petty over one missed gift. I needed something they couldn't argue with, something clean and factual that left no room for interpretation. I started again. To Nathan Blake and Kimberly Blake, I wrote at the top. My hand hesitated over the next line. Once I wrote these words, I couldn't take them back. I kept going. This letter serves as formal notice that your occupancy of the property located at Parker Lane will be terminated, effective 30 days from the date of this letter. As outlined in the lease agreement signed on May 15th, 3 years ago, I am exercising my right as the property owner to reclaim the residence. The property will be listed for sale. You will need to vacate the premises and remove all personal belongings by the end of the 30-day period. Please contact me if you have questions regarding the transition. I signed my name at the bottom. Carolyn Blake. Simple, professional. No accusations, no explanations, just the facts. I read it 3 more times, looking for anything they could use against me. Any phrase that sounded spiteful or emotional or weak. There was nothing. Just a landlord informing her tenants that the lease was ending. Which is exactly what this was. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and set it aside. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. For 3 years, I'd been automatically transferring money, each month, into what Nate called the house maintenance fund. It was supposed to cover repairs, emergencies, things that came up with owning a home. In reality, it covered whatever Nate and Kim decided they wanted. New curtains, landscaping, that fancy grill. I found the automatic transfer settings and clicked cancel. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment? I clicked yes. Another account was linked to theirs for property tax payments. I'd been covering those too, even though the agreement was that they'd handle it. Somehow, it always fell back on me. I changed the settings so the payments would stop after this year's taxes were settled. One by one, I cut the threads that had been tying my finances to their comfort. It felt like pulling off a bandage. Sharp at first, then surprisingly freeing. As I was closing my laptop, I thought about my grandchildren. The little faces that would be confused when they had to pack up their rooms. The questions they'd ask that I wouldn't know how to answer. My chest tightened. Was I punishing innocent kids for their parents' mistakes? But then I thought about Christmas dinner. My grandson and granddaughter sitting at that table, watching their parents hand out gifts to everyone else while their grandmother sat empty-handed. They'd seen it. They'd absorbed it. What lesson were they learning in that moment? That it's okay to humiliate someone as long as you're throwing a good party? That grandma's feelings don't matter as much as keeping up appearances? If I let this go, if I kept funding their lifestyle and swallowing my hurt, what would I be teaching those kids about respect, about boundaries, about standing up for yourself when the people who should love you treat you like you're disposable? I closed the laptop and picked up the letter again. This wasn't about punishing children. This was about refusing to model a life where you accept cruelty in exchange for proximity. That afternoon, I drove to the post office. The woman behind the counter was someone I'd seen dozens of times over the years. She smiled when I walked up. Certified mail? I asked, sliding the envelope across the counter. Sure thing, hun. Just need you to fill out this form. I wrote Nate and Kim's address carefully, my handwriting steady. When I handed it back, she processed it and gave me a receipt with a tracking number. This'll get there in 2 to 3 business days, she said. You'll be able to see when it's delivered and who signed for it. I folded the receipt and tucked it into my wallet. Holding that small piece of paper felt like holding a shield. Proof that I'd done this. Proof that I'd finally said enough. On my way home, I made one more stop. The real estate office was in a small building near the downtown square. I'd called ahead and made an appointment with an agent named Robert, a calm man in his 50s who'd helped my neighbor sell her house last year. He met me in a quiet office with photos of houses on the walls. So you're looking to sell a property you own, but don't currently live in, he said, pulling out a notepad. Can you tell me a bit about it? I gave him the address, described the house. 5 bedrooms, large yard, good school district. He nodded, taking notes. That area's been pretty strong lately. If the house is in good condition, you shouldn't have any trouble finding buyers. When are you thinking of listing? Soon, I said. Within the next month. And the current occupants, will they be cooperative with showings? I paused. Their family. My son and his wife. They're going to need to move out first. Robert's pen stopped moving. He looked up at me, his expression neutral, but understanding. I see. And they're aware of the timeline? They will be, I said, very soon. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll be honest with you, Miss Blake. Family property sales can get complicated. Emotions run high. If you need time to sort things out on your end first, that's completely understandable. But if you're sure about moving forward, I can start pulling comps and getting a market analysis ready for you. I'm sure, I said. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd have the strength to follow through when Nate called. Because he would call. The moment that letter arrived, the moment he realized I wasn't bluffing, he'd call, and I'd have to decide if I could really do this, if I could really stand firm while he begged, while Kim cried, while my grandchildren asked why Grandma was making them leave their home. I barely slept. The next morning, I checked the tracking number on my phone while my coffee brewed. Delivered. Signed for at 10:42 a.m. I set the phone down and took a long, slow breath. It was done. Now I just had to wait for the storm. The first text came in at 11:03 a.m., 21 minutes after someone signed for the certified letter. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was washing dishes. I dried my hands and looked at the screen. Nate, did you send us something? Kim says there's a weird letter with your name on it. I set the phone face down and went back to the dishes. 3 minutes later, another buzz. Mom, seriously, what is this? Call me. I turned off the water, dried the last plate, and put it away in the cabinet. My phone kept lighting up on the counter, vibrating with each new message. This has to be a mistake. You can't be serious about this. Mom, pick up the phone. I made myself a fresh cup of tea, added honey, and sat at my dining table. The phone was still buzzing. I could see the notifications piling up on the lock screen, but I didn't reach for it. For 3 years, every time they texted, I jumped. Didn't matter if I was in the middle of something. Didn't matter if it was late at night or early in the morning. When they needed me, I responded immediately. Not anymore. By noon, Kim started texting too. The first message was sweet, almost sticky with false concern. Hey Carolyn, Nate showed me the letter you sent. I think there might be some confusion. Can we talk about this? I'm sure we can work it out. I sipped my tea and watched a bird land on the railing of my little balcony. 5 minutes later, the sweetness started to crack. We've made this house a home. You know how much the kids love it here. You wouldn't really make them leave, would you? Then, an hour after that, the tone shifted completely. I don't understand why you're doing this. After everything we've done to include you in our lives, this is how you repay us? We invited you to Christmas. We made you part of our family, and this is what we get? I read that one twice. They invited me to Christmas. Like I should be grateful they allowed me to cook their meal and sit at their table while they humiliated me. They made me part of their family. Like I wasn't already family. Like being Nate's mother wasn't enough on its own. I set the phone down and didn't respond. By evening, Nate's messages had gone from confused to angry. This is insane, Mom. You're actually going to kick us out of our home? The home we've built together, where your grandkids live? Our home, there it was again. That phrase that only appeared when it was convenient. You can't do this. We have kids. We have jobs. We can't just pack up and leave in 30 days. That's not how this works. Actually, it was exactly how it worked. He'd signed the papers. He'd agreed to the terms. He just never thought I'd use them. The next message made my jaw tighten. Call me, right now. We need to fix this before it gets out of hand. Before it gets out of hand. Like I was a problem that needed to be managed. Like this was some emotional outburst they could talk me down from if they just used the right words. I turned my phone on silent and made myself dinner. The next morning, I woke up to 17 new messages. Most were from Nate and Kim, cycling through the same arguments, the same guilt trips. The same demands that I call them immediately. But there was one from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Blake, this is Jennifer Ramos from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. I received a call from Nathan Blake expressing concern about a notice he received regarding the property at Parker Lane. He mentioned you're planning to list the home for sale. As HOA president, I'll need to coordinate with you regarding any transition. Additionally, Mr. Blake seemed quite distressed about an upcoming event he'd planned to host at the property. Please give me a call when you have a moment to discuss. I read it slowly. Nate had already contacted the HOA. He was scrambling, trying to find anyone who might be able to stop this. And there was an event he'd planned. Something he was worried about. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, it was Lydia. Hey Mom, it's me calling from my work phone because I figured you might not answer numbers you don't know. Listen, Nate just called me. Well, actually, he called my husband first. But when that didn't work, he called me directly. He's completely freaking out. He wants me to talk you out of whatever you're doing. I told him I support your decision and that he needs to deal with this directly with you, not through me. Just wanted to give you a heads up that he's going to keep trying to find ways around you. Stay strong, okay? Call me later if you need to talk. I saved the message and felt a small warmth in my chest. At least someone understood. That afternoon, Kim sent a voice memo instead of a text. I almost didn't listen to it, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice came through tearful, shaking, designed to pull at my heartstrings. Carolyn, please, I don't know what we did to make you so angry. But whatever it was, I'm sorry. We're both sorry. This is just so sudden and so extreme. Nate's boss is expecting him to host a New Year's party here. It's important for his career. If we have to cancel, if we have to tell everyone we're being forced to move, he's going to look unstable, unreliable. It could cost him opportunities. Is that really what you want? To hurt your own son's career over a misunderstanding? I stopped the recording. So that was the event, a work party. Something Nate had probably been bragging about for weeks, promising his boss and colleagues a nice evening at his beautiful home in the good neighborhood. Except it wasn't his home. It was mine, and he'd forgotten that until it was too late. The voicemail from Kim's mother came next, her voice dripping with disappointment. Carolyn, I'm very concerned about what I've been hearing. Kim is beside herself. Those poor children are going to be uprooted from their school, their friends, everything they know. I understand you might have had your feelings hurt at Christmas, but don't you think this is a bit extreme? Surely we can all sit down like adults and talk this through. My feelings hurt. Like I'd pouted over a forgotten birthday card instead of being publicly humiliated and dismissed. I deleted the voicemail. Later that evening, Robert the realtor called. I actually answered this one. Ms. Blake, just wanted to confirm we're still on for our meeting this Friday to go over the market analysis and discuss listing strategy. I've pulled some recent sales in the area, and I think you're going to be pleased with the numbers. Friday works perfectly, I said. Great. And just so I'm prepared, have the current occupants been notified of the timeline? They have. And how are they taking it? I glanced at my phone, at the wall of unread messages, at the voicemails I hadn't listened to. About as well as expected, I said. After I hung up, another text came through from Nate. Mom, call me, it's urgent. I stared at that word, urgent. 3 years ago, when I needed help moving furniture, that wasn't urgent. When I was sick with the flu and asked if someone could pick up groceries for me, that wasn't urgent. When I mentioned I was feeling lonely and maybe we could have dinner together sometime, just the family, that definitely wasn't urgent. But now that their comfortable life was at risk, now that their social status and Nate's career party and Kim's perfect image were threatened, suddenly everything was urgent. The urgency wasn't about me, it never had been. It was about them, about protecting what they had, about keeping me in the role I'd always played, the quiet bankroll who knew her place. I set my phone on the counter and walked away. Let them panic, let them scramble, let them feel, just for a moment, what it's like when the person you've been taking for granted stops being available at your convenience. I'd spent 3 years being urgent for them. They could spend 30 days being urgent for themselves. 3 days after I sent the letter, I was sitting on my balcony with a book I wasn't really reading when my phone rang. Lydia. "Hey Mom," she said. "You holding up okay?" "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. Surprisingly fine, actually. "Good, because I need to tell you something. Nate called me again this morning." I closed the book. "What did he say?" "He's telling everyone you're evicting them over a silly misunderstanding. That you got upset about one missed Christmas gift, and now you're punishing the whole family." He made it sound like you just snapped out of nowhere. I'd expected this. Of course he'd rewrite the story to make himself the victim. "He wants me to convince you to change your mind," Lydia continued. "He said you're not thinking clearly, that you're lonely and maybe a little depressed, and that's why you're making rash decisions." Something hot flashed through my chest. "I'm not depressed. I'm drawing a line." I know that, and I told him that. I said there's a big difference between a misunderstanding and a pattern of treating someone like they're disposable. He didn't want to hear it. "What did he say?" Lydia sighed. "He said I don't understand because I'm not there. I don't see how much they do for you, how much they include you." He actually said that. Like hosting you at the dinner table while they humiliate you is some kind of favor. I looked out at the bare trees beyond my balcony, their branches dark against the winter sky. "Do you think I'm being cruel?" I asked quietly. "No." Her answer came immediately, firm. "I think you're being honest. And I think they're terrified because for the first time in years, they can't manipulate you into backing down." "That's not cruelty, Mom. That's self-respect." After we hung up, I sat with those words. Self-respect. Such a simple phrase, but it felt strange applying it to myself. For so long, I'd measured my worth by how useful I could be, how little trouble I caused, how easily I could disappear when I wasn't needed. Maybe that was the problem. That evening, I went to the small church I'd been attending for the past year. It was a Wednesday night service, quiet and familiar. I liked the routine of it, the hymns I knew by heart, the faces I recognized, even if I didn't know all their names. After the service, as I was gathering my coat, a woman named Patricia approached me. She was about my age, always kind, always the first to volunteer for the potluck dinners. "Carolyn," she said gently, "do you have a minute?" We sat in one of the back pews while people filed out around us. "I heard something today," Patricia said carefully, "from Kim's mother. She mentioned you're having some family difficulty. Something about the house they're living in?" My stomach tightened, so it was already spreading through the church. "It's complicated," I said. "I'm sure it is." Patricia folded her hands in her lap. "I don't know the details, and you don't owe me an explanation, but I wanted to check on you. Make sure you're all right." I looked at her, this woman who barely knew me, showing more concern than my own son had in weeks. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "If your child treated you poorly, repeatedly, and you had the ability to set a boundary, would you do it, even if people judged you for it?" Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "My son and his wife lived with me for 2 years after they got married," she finally said. "They were supposed to save money for their own place, but somehow that never happened. They ate my food, used my utilities, and treated me like a landlord they didn't have to pay. When I finally asked them to leave, my son didn't speak to me for 6 months. People at church whispered about it, said I was being selfish, that families should stick together, no matter what." "What did you do?" I asked. I stuck to my decision, and you know what? After those 6 months, my son came back. He apologized. He said moving out forced him to grow up, to take responsibility. Our relationship now is better than it was when he was using me." She looked at me directly. "Setting boundaries isn't cruel, Carolyn. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do, even when it doesn't feel like it." When I got home that night, there was a note tucked into my door from my neighbor across the hall, a woman named Ruth, who I'd chatted with a few times in the elevator but didn't know well. The note was short. "Carolyn, I saw your son and his wife here earlier, knocking on your door. If you need someone to run interference, just let me know. I raised 4 kids. I know what it's like when they think they're entitled to more than they've earned. You're stronger than you think. Ruth." I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. Over the next few days, I started to notice something. Yes, some people judged me. Kim's mother was telling anyone who would listen that I was being unreasonable. A few people at church gave me sympathetic looks that felt more like pity than support. But there were others, quiet voices, women my age, who'd lived through their own versions of this story. The woman at the coffee shop, who always remembered my order, mentioned casually that she'd finally stopped lending money to her daughter after years of never being paid back. My friend from the book club admitted she'd been covering her son's car payments for 3 years because he said he couldn't afford them, only to see him post pictures of an expensive vacation online. Each conversation was a small reminder that I wasn't alone, that this pattern of adult children taking advantage of their parents' generosity wasn't unique to me, and each conversation made me feel a little less guilty, a little more certain. I started imagining what came next, after the house sold, after Nate and Kim moved out, after the dust settled. Maybe I'd look for a place closer to Lydia, somewhere I could see my other grandchildren more often, be part of a family dynamic that didn't leave me feeling used. Maybe I'd find one of those communities for people my age, the kind with activities and walking groups and neighbors who actually wanted your company, not your checkbook. Maybe I'd finally have space to figure out who Carolyn was outside of being someone's mother, someone's wallet, someone's convenient solution. For the first time in years, I felt something that had been missing. Hope. I was standing at my kitchen sink one evening, washing the dinner dishes and thinking about Colorado, when I heard it. Heavy footsteps in the hallway outside my condo. Not the light steps of my elderly neighbors. Not the quick pace of someone heading to the elevator. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. I turned off the water and listened. A knock, firm but controlled. Then Nate's voice, loud enough to carry but trying to sound calm. "Mom, I know you're in there. We need to talk, face to face, no more hiding." I dried my hands slowly, my heart picking up speed. They weren't going to try texts anymore. They weren't going to leave voicemails or send messages through other people. They were bringing the storm directly to me. And I was going to have to decide, right now, if I had the strength to weather it. I walked to the door slowly, my slippers quiet on the floor. Through the peephole, I could see them. Nate stood closest to the door, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn and tired in a way I'd never seen before. Kim was behind him, her eyes red and puffy, mascara smudged at the corners. And there, partially hidden behind their legs, were my grandchildren, each clutching a stuffed animal like a security blanket. My hand went to the deadbolt, then stopped. 4 days ago. They were laughing at my expense. Now they were at my door, desperate and panicked. I slid the chain into place and opened the door just wide enough to see them clearly. Nate's eyes met mine, and for a second, neither of us spoke. "Mom," he finally said, his voice strained. "Can we please come in? We need to talk about this." "We can talk right here," I said calmly. Kim stepped forward, her hands clasped together like she was praying. "Carolyn, please, the kids are with us. Can't we at least do this inside?" I looked down at my grandchildren. They were staring at me with wide, confused eyes. This wasn't their fault. None of this was their fault. But I also wasn't going to let them be used as shields. "What do you want to say?" I asked, my voice steady. Nate rubbed his face with both hands. "What do I want to say? Mom, you're kicking us out of our home. You sent us a letter saying we have 30 days to pack up our entire lives and leave. That's what I want to talk about." "It's not your home," I said quietly. "It's a house I own, a house you lease from me, and I'm exercising my right to end that lease, just like the paperwork says I can. We have kids, Mom." His voice rose slightly. "We can't just pack up and move in 30 days. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a place that fast? In this market, with our budget. You've had 3 years to save money, to plan, to build equity of your own," I said. "What happened to all those promotions you kept talking about? All the times you said things were about to turn around?" Kim's voice cut in, sharp and defensive. "This isn't about money, Carolyn. This is about you being vindictive. You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt at Christmas." "My feelings got hurt," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you think this is about? What else would it be?" Kim threw her hands up. "One dinner doesn't go perfectly, and suddenly you're destroying our lives." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Even now, even standing at my door begging, She still didn't get it. Kim, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You gave a gift to every single person at that table. You gave one to your parents. You gave one to your church friends. You gave one to the piano teacher. You even gave one to Carla, your cleaning lady. But you looked at me. The woman who cooked that entire meal. The woman who funded the house you were sitting in. And you said my gift must have been lost in the mail. You made sure everyone in that room saw that I didn't matter. It was a mistake, Kim said quickly. The package really didn't arrive in time. It wasn't personal. Then why did you smirk when you said it? I asked. Why did Nate joke about me being patient? Why did people laugh? Nate shifted uncomfortably. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? Because from where I was sitting, it felt very much in proportion. It felt like the truth finally being said out loud. That I'm convenient when you need something, but invisible when you don't. My grandson tugged on Kim's sleeve. Mommy, why is Grandma mad at us? Kim's eyes filled with fresh tears. She crouched down and pulled him close. She's not mad at you, baby. Grandma's just upset right now. Are we really going to have to move? My granddaughter asked, her voice small. I looked at her, at those innocent eyes that were trying to make sense of adult problems. This was the part I'd been dreading. The part where I had to be honest, without being cruel. I crouched down too, meeting her at eye level through the gap in the door. You might have to move, sweetheart, I said gently. But you're going to be okay. Kids are tougher than they think, and no matter where you live, I'll still be your grandma. Can't you just let us stay? She whispered. Please? The words hit me right in the chest, but I pushed through. If I do that, I said softly, I'd be teaching everyone that it's okay to treat people badly as long as you want what they have. That's not a lesson I want you to learn. She stared at me, processing, then nodded slowly, like maybe she understood more than I expected. Nate pulled her back, his jaw tight. Mom, please, we'll make this right. We'll throw you a big birthday party. I'll buy you whatever you want. Just call the realtor and tell him you changed your mind. Tell the HOA it was a mistake. I'm not calling anyone, I said. You're really going to do this, Kim said, her voice rising. You're really going to ruin our lives over one bad night. I'm not ruining your lives. I'm reclaiming mine. Kim's face twisted. Fine. You want to know what this really is. This is you being bitter and lonely. You're jealous that we have what you don't. A family, a home, a life. So you're tearing ours down to make yourself feel better. I absorbed the words, let them bounce off the wall I'd built over the past week. If that's what you need to believe, I said calmly. If you do this, Kim continued, her voice shaking, you're going to lose us. We'll have to move. Maybe to another state. The kids won't see you. You'll be alone in this condo with no one. Is that what you want? To die alone because you couldn't forgive one mistake? There it was, the fear they thought would break me. The threat wrapped up as concern. Growing old alone, dying alone. The nightmare every mother is supposed to carry. But I thought about Lydia's voice on the phone, fierce and supportive. I thought about Patricia at church, about Ruth's note slipped under my door. I thought about the life I could build, the choices I could make, the peace I'd felt in the past week. I'd rather be alone than used, I said quietly. And I'm not alone. I have a daughter who calls to check on me. I have grandchildren who send me drawings. I have friends who see me as more than a wallet. I have options that don't involve begging my own child to treat me like I matter. Nate flinched like I'd slapped him. So that's it, he said. You're really going to let strangers buy our house? Your house. I raised an eyebrow. It's interesting that you still call it that. For 3 years, it was only my house when you needed me to sign something, or write a check, or fix a problem. But when you wanted to brag or post photos or throw parties, it was yours. Kim grabbed Nate's arm, her eyes desperate. We can fight this, she hissed, loud enough for me to hear. Get a lawyer. She's old. How strong can her taste be? Maybe we can argue she's not thinking clearly. I heard every single word. By all means, I said, my voice steady and cold. Talk to a lawyer. They'll be happy to explain the paperwork you both signed, the lease agreement, the 30-day notice clause. The line that says I can end your occupancy for any reason. They'll explain it very clearly. Nate stared at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. You're serious, he whispered. Yes, I said. For the first time in a very long time, I am completely serious. Kim's face crumpled. What about Nate's work party? His boss is expecting to come to the house. If we have to cancel, if we have to admit we're being evicted by his own mother, it's going to destroy his reputation. Then I suggest you find a new venue, I said. You have 30 days. That should be enough time. I started to close the door. Mom, wait, Nate said, his voice breaking. Please, we can fix this. Just tell us what you want. What do we have to do? I paused, looking at him through the narrowing gap. I want you to understand that respect isn't optional, I said quietly. That people aren't tools you use and discard when they're no longer convenient. That your mother isn't a backup plan, or a safety net, or a punchline at your dinner table. We didn't mean it like that, he said weakly. Maybe not, but that's how it felt, and I'm done feeling that way. I closed the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and stood there, listening to the silence on the other side. After a long moment, I heard Kim's muffled voice. Come on, she's not gonna change her mind tonight. Footsteps. The sound of the elevator doors opening and closing, then silence. I walked back to my kitchen, my hands steady, and finished washing the dishes. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the one left waiting. They were. The days after the confrontation at my door felt strange. I'd expected more pounding, more desperate phone calls, more guilt trips delivered through mutual acquaintances. But instead, there was mostly silence. Oh, the messages still came. Updates from Lydia about what Nate was saying to other family members. A few more voicemails from Kim that I deleted without listening to. But the frantic energy from those first few days had shifted into something else. Resignation. They were packing. I knew because my neighbor Ruth mentioned seeing a moving truck pull up to Parker Lane when she drove past on her way to the grocery store. Saw your son loading boxes, she said, when we ran into each other in the hallway. He didn't look happy, but he was doing it. I nodded, unsure what to say. She patted my arm. Good. Maybe he'll learn something from this. The gossip spread faster than I expected. At church the following Sunday, I felt the weight of stares before I even sat down. Conversations stopped when I walked past. People who usually smiled and waved suddenly found their hymnals very interesting. Kim's mother was there, sitting near the front with a group of women who kept glancing back at me with expressions that ranged from pity to disapproval. After the service, I was gathering my things when one of them approached. A woman named Dorothy, who'd always been pleasant enough in passing. Carolyn, she said, her voice dripping with concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. I heard about your situation with Nathan and Kimberly. It must be so difficult for you. It's been a process, I said carefully. I just can't imagine, she continued, shaking her head. Those poor children having to leave their home right after Christmas, it seems so harsh. There was a pause, like she was waiting for me to defend myself or apologize. I didn't. Well, she said, when the silence stretched too long, I'm sure you'll work it out. Family always does. She walked away, leaving the implication hanging in the air. That I was the problem. That I was being unreasonable. But then, as I was heading toward the exit, another woman caught my arm. Someone I recognized, but didn't know well. Her name was Margaret, and she was probably 10 years older than me, her hair white and her hands weathered. Don't listen to them, she said quietly. I heard what really happened at that Christmas dinner. My daughter works with Kim, and the story got around. What they did to you was shameful. I blanked, surprised. Thank you. I wish I'd had your courage 30 years ago, she said, her voice dropping even lower. My son and his wife lived off me for a decade before I finally said enough. By then, I'd given them so much I had nothing left for myself. You're doing the right thing. She squeezed my hand and walked away, leaving me standing there with a lump in my throat. Over the next 2 weeks, I had more of those moments. Small conversations with women who understood, who'd been in similar situations, who wished they'd drawn their lines sooner. But there were also the judgments, the whispered comments, the people who thought I was being cruel, punishing innocent grandchildren over something petty. I learned to let it roll off. Their opinions didn't change the facts. On a cold Thursday afternoon, Robert, the realtor, called. Miss Blake, we're all set for the photo shoot tomorrow at the Parker Lane property. I spoke with your son, and he's agreed to have the house cleared and ready for us. Are you planning to be there? I hesitated. I hadn't been back to that house since Christmas night. Yes, I said. I'll be there. The next day, I drove to Parker Lane for the first time in weeks. The neighborhood looked the same. Neat lawns, nice cars and driveways, the kind of street where people put up elaborate holiday decorations and hosted summer barbecues. I pulled up to the house and sat in my car for a moment, just looking at it. It was a beautiful house, I couldn't deny that. The kind of place I would have loved to raise my own children in, if we'd been able to afford it back then. But looking at it now, I didn't feel the tug of sentimentality I'd expected. It was just a house. Walls and floors and a roof, nothing more. Robert was already there, setting up equipment with a photographer. They greeted me warmly and got to work capturing angles and lighting. I walked through the room slowly. The living room, where we had that Christmas dinner. The kitchen, where I'd spent hours cooking. The bedrooms upstairs, where my grandchildren slept. There were still boxes stacked in corners, piles of toys waiting to be sorted. Evidence of lives being uprooted. But I also noticed things I hadn't seen before. The fresh paint on the walls, the expensive light fixtures, the renovations they'd made with money that should have been going toward building their own equity. They'd treated this place like it was permanent, like the rules didn't apply to them. As I stood in the living room, looking out at the backyard, I heard small voices. I turned and saw my grandchildren standing in the doorway, watching me. They must have been dropped off while I was upstairs. "Hi, Grandma," my granddaughter said quietly. "Hi, sweethearts," I said, my chest tightening. My grandson held up a piece of paper. "We made you something." I knelt down as they came closer, showing me their drawing. It was 2 houses, one labeled Mommy and Daddy's new house, and the other, Grandma's house. Between them was a winding road with a little stick figure that looked like it was walking from one to the other. "That's me," my granddaughter explained, pointing at the figure. "I can still visit you, right, even if we move?" I swallowed hard. "Of course you can. Anytime you want." "Daddy says you're mad at him," my grandson said. "Are you mad at us too?" "No, baby, I'm not mad at you. Not even a little bit." "Then why do we have to leave?" I looked at their faces, so open and trusting, and chose my words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that affect everyone around them," I said. "Your mom and dad made some choices, and now things have to change. But that doesn't mean I love you any less. That will never change." They seemed to accept that, nodding seriously. After they left with Kim, who appeared just long enough to collect them without making eye contact with me, I stood in the empty house, feeling the weight of what I'd done. These kids were innocent. They didn't ask for any of this. But then I thought about Christmas dinner again, about them sitting at that table, watching their parents treat me like I was invisible, about the lesson they were learning in that moment. If I backed down now, what would I be teaching them? That you can treat people however you want as long as they need you? That being family means accepting disrespect? No, better they learn now while they were young. That actions have consequences. That respect matters. That even grandmas have limits. Robert found me standing there and cleared his throat gently. "All done with photos. The house shows really well. I think we're going to get strong interest." "Good," I said. "Ms. Blake, can I be honest with you?" I nodded. "I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen a lot of family property sales. Most of them end badly, because people wait until they're so angry, they make rash decisions. But you," he paused, "you're handling this with more grace than most. Whatever your reasons, they're clearly not impulsive." "Thank you," I said quietly. "Before I answer your next question, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? Maybe it was with family, maybe it was at work, maybe it was with a friend who kept crossing lines. I'd love to know your story. Drop it in the comments below. And if you're finding yourself connecting to what I went through, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the next part of this story is going to show you exactly what happened when I finally signed on the dotted line. You won't want to miss it. A week later, Robert called again. "We have an offer," he said. And I could hear the smile in his voice. A strong one. Cash buyers, no contingencies. They're willing to close fast. "How much?" He named a figure that made me sit down. It was more than I'd expected. Enough to buy a small house near Lydia, with money left over. Enough to start fresh without worrying about finances for a good long while. They want to close 30 days from now, Robert continued, which lines up perfectly with your current occupant's move-out date. We just need your signature to accept the offer. I looked around my condo, at the life I'd built here, at the quiet, peaceful space that was mine and mine alone. Miss Blake? Robert's voice pulled me back. Are you ready to let it go? I thought about that house, about the years I'd poured into it, the money, the hope that it would secure my place in my son's life. I thought about Christmas dinner, about all the moments before that, about the pattern I'd finally seen clearly. Yes, I said. Send me the paperwork. I'm ready. That night, I signed my name on the acceptance letter and sent it back. There was no going back now. The house would sell. Nate and Kim would move. And I would finally, for the first time in 3 years, be free. The closing happened on a Tuesday morning in late January. I sat at a long conference table across from the buyers, a young couple in their 30s with a baby on the way. The woman kept looking at photos of the house on her phone, smiling at her husband, whispering about which room would be the nursery. They reminded me of myself 30 years ago, full of hope, full of plans. The title company representative walked us through page after page of paperwork, signatures, initials, dates, legal language that all boiled down to one simple fact. I was selling the house. When I signed the final page, the one that transferred ownership, my hand didn't shake. I thought it might. I thought there'd be some big emotional moment, some wave of regret or second thoughts, but there wasn't. The representative slid a check across the table. The amount written on it still didn't feel quite real, even though I'd known it was coming. Congratulations, Miss Blake, she said with a professional smile. The property is officially sold. The young couple stood, shook my hand, thanked me. We're going to take such good care of it, the woman said earnestly. We can't wait to make it our home. I smiled at her. I hope you do. I hope it gives you everything you're dreaming of. And I meant it. As I walked out of that office, check folded in my purse, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The weight I'd been carrying for 3 years, the constant worry about property taxes and maintenance and whether Nate would make his payments on time, all of it just lifted. It wasn't my problem anymore. 2 weeks later, I stood in the driveway of a small cottage in a 55 and older community about 20 minutes from Lydia's house in Colorado. The cottage wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a cozy kitchen with enough counter space to roll out pie dough, but it had big windows that let in mountain light and a little porch where I could sit with my coffee in the mornings. It was mine, all mine. No shared ownership, no lease agreements, no strings attached to anyone else's life. The moving truck pulled up right on time, and within an hour, men were hauling boxes and furniture inside. Lydia showed up with her 2 kids, who immediately started exploring the new space like it was an adventure. Grandma, you have a fireplace, my youngest granddaughter squealed, running her hand along the stone mantel. I do, I said, laughing. We can use it this winter. Make hot chocolate and tell stories. Lydia came up beside me, looking around the living room. Mom, this place is perfect. How does it feel? It feels right, I said simply. We spent the afternoon unpacking. Lydia helped me arrange the kitchen, placing dishes in cabinets and utensils in drawers. Her kids helped unpack books, stacking them on the shelves in slightly crooked piles that I'd fix later. Where do you want the guest bed? Lydia asked, standing in the doorway of the 2nd bedroom. Right under that window, I said, and I want to put up those bunks we looked at, the kind that can sleep 2 or 3 kids when everyone comes to visit. She grinned. You're planning sleepovers already? Why not? I've got the space now, and the time. We set up the guest room with cheerful bedding and a basket of toys in the corner. A room that was meant to be used, not just looked at. A room that said my grandchildren were welcome anytime, not just when it was convenient for their parents. By evening, the cottage was starting to look like a home. I filled my kitchen with the familiar spices and ingredients I loved. Set out my favorite cookbooks on the counter. Hung pictures on the walls, not of fancy magazine spreads, but of my family. Lydia and her kids, my grandchildren from Texas, even though things were complicated now. My late husband, smiling in a photo from years ago. Lydia made us sandwiches for dinner, and we sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by half-empty boxes, eating and talking. "Have you heard from Nate?" she asked carefully. "Not since the day they moved out," I said. "He sent one text, letting me know they'd cleared the house. That was it." "Are you okay with that?" I thought about it. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants him to reach out, to actually apologize, not just because he wants something, but because he understands what he did. But another part of me knows that might take a long time. Maybe it won't happen at all. And if it doesn't, then I'll grieve that," I said honestly. "I'll grieve the relationship I thought we had and the son I thought I raised. But I won't go back to being who I was. Not for him, not for anyone." Lydia reached over and squeezed my hand. That night, after Lydia and the kids left, I walked through my cottage slowly, turning off lights, checking that everything was locked. The quiet felt different than it had in my condo. Not lonely, peaceful. I made myself a cup of tea and stood at the window, looking out at the mountains in the distance, their peaks dark against the evening sky. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to need me. Wasn't bracing myself for the next request, the next crisis, the next reminder that my value was tied to what I could provide. I was just existing, on my own terms, in my own space. It felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the sound of birds I didn't recognize yet. I made coffee, grabbed a blanket, and sat on my little porch, watching the neighborhood wake up. A woman about my age walked past with a small dog and waved. "You must be the new neighbor. I'm Carol. Welcome to the community." "Carolyn," I said. "Nice to meet you. There's a walking group that meets every Wednesday morning if you're interested. And bingo on Friday nights. Very low stakes, mostly just an excuse to gossip." I laughed. "That sounds perfect." She smiled and continued her walk, the dog trotting beside her. A few minutes later, another neighbor stopped by with a plate of muffins, introducing herself as Helen and offering to show me where the community garden was. By lunchtime, I'd met 5 new people, all friendly, all genuinely welcoming. No one knew me as the woman who funded her son's house. No one knew about Christmas dinner, or the letter, or the confrontation at my door. Here I was just Carolyn, a new resident, a blank slate. That afternoon, I was in my kitchen organizing the pantry when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. Nate. My hand froze halfway to the shelf. I stared at his name, my heart picking up speed. For weeks I'd wondered if he'd reach out. What he'd say, whether it would be another demand, or maybe, just maybe, something real. I picked up the phone and opened the message. The words on the screen made me sit down slowly. Whatever came next, whatever he wanted, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the same woman who'd sat at that Christmas table, and I never would be again. I stared at the text message for a long time before I actually read it. Just seeing his name on my screen made my stomach tighten. I'd gotten used to the silence, used to not bracing myself for what he might say next. But here it was. After weeks of nothing, I took a breath and opened it. "The kids miss you. They keep asking when they can see Grandma again. I know you're mad at us. I know we went too far. I'm sorry. Maybe we could talk in the new year? Just talk. No pressure." I read it 3 times. It wasn't the groveling apology I might have expected. No dramatic declarations. No promises to change everything. But it also wasn't dismissive. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't him trying to convince me I'd overreacted. He admitted they'd gone too far. That was something. I set the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains. The afternoon light was starting to fade, casting long shadows across the snow. What did I want from him? An apology, yes, but more than that, I wanted him to understand. To really see what had happened, not just at Christmas, but over the past 3 years. To recognize that I wasn't a resource to be managed, but a person who deserved respect. Could a text message do that? Could a conversation? I didn't know. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lydia calling. "Hey Mom," she said when I picked up. "Did Nate text you?" Because he texted me too. Asked if I thought you'd be willing to talk to him. I told him that was between you and him, and that I wasn't going to be a go-between. I smiled slightly. Thank you for that. What did his message say? I read it to her word for word. There was a pause on her end. What do you think? I don't know. It's not much, but it's more than he's given before. He actually said sorry. Yeah, but sorry for what? Sorry you're upset? Or sorry for what they did? That was the question, wasn't it? I'm not sure, I admitted. Mom, whatever you decide, I support you. If you want to respond, respond. If you want to ignore it, ignore it. If you want to meet him halfway, or keep your distance, either way is okay. This is your call. You won't be disappointed if I try to rebuild things with him. Of course not. He's your son. If there's a chance to have a real relationship with him, one built on respect instead of obligation, then that's worth exploring. But only if you want to. Not because you feel like you have to. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and my phone in front of me. I opened a new message to Nate and started typing. I appreciate you reaching out. I've missed the kids too. I deleted it. Too soft. It sounded like I was already forgiving everything. I tried again. You hurt me deeply, and an apology doesn't fix 3 years of being taken for granted. Delete. Too harsh. Too angry. Third attempt. I'm glad you texted. I think we should talk, but I need you to understand that things can't go back to how they were. Closer, but still not quite right. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, thinking about what I really wanted to say. Not what would make him feel better, not what would smooth things over the fastest, but what was actually true. I picked up the phone again and typed slowly, carefully. I'm with your sister and the grandkids right now. I'm not mad. I drew a line. When you're ready to talk without jokes or blame, I'm open to a conversation. But understand this, my support is no longer automatic. If you want a relationship, it will have to be built on mutual respect, not obligation. I read it twice, then added one more line. The kids are always welcome to visit me. That hasn't changed. My finger hovered over the send button. This message would set the tone for whatever came next. It would tell Nate exactly where I stood and what I needed from him if we were going to move forward. It gave him an opening, but it didn't let him off easy. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The message showed as delivered immediately. Then, a few seconds later, it changed to read. I put the phone face down on the table and tried to go back to my tea, but my hands were shaking slightly. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15, no response. I told myself that was fine. He needed time to process. Maybe he was working. Maybe he was talking to Kin about what to say back. Or maybe he was angry. Maybe my message felt too cold, too unforgiving. Maybe he'd decide it wasn't worth the effort. I couldn't control that. I could only control what I'd said and how I'd said it. The truth. An hour later, the message still sat there. Delivered. Read. Unanswered. I forced myself to get up, to move, to do something other than stare at my phone, waiting for a response that might never come. From the living room, I heard Lydia's voice. Mom, the kids want to know if you'll play a board game with us. They found one in the boxes. I looked at my phone one more time, then turned it face down on the counter and walked toward the sound of my grandchildren's laughter. My youngest granddaughter was setting up pieces on a colorful game board spread across the coffee table. Her brother was organizing cards into neat stacks, his tongue poking out in concentration the way Nate used to do when he was that age. Grandma, you can be the red piece, my granddaughter said, handing me a little plastic token. That's the best one. I sat down on the floor with them, crossing my legs and accepting the game piece. What are we playing? I asked. It's about building a village, she explained. You have to collect resources and help your neighbors and make your village the happiest. Sounds perfect, I said. Lydia settled onto the couch behind us, her phone in hand but her attention on the kids. We played for an hour, maybe more. The kids argued good-naturedly about the rules, celebrated when they drew good cards, groaned when things didn't go their way, and I just sat there with them, fully present, not thinking about texts or responses or whether my son would choose growth or resentment. At some point, my phone buzzed in the kitchen. I heard it, but I didn't get up. Whatever message waited for me could wait a little longer. Right now, I was exactly where I needed to be, with people who wanted me there. Not because I was useful or convenient or funding their dreams, but because I was Grandma, and that was enough. Later, after Lydia and the kids had gone home and the cottage was quiet again, I finally checked my phone. One new message from Nate. I opened it slowly. "Can I call you tomorrow? I'd like to actually talk, not just text." Short, simple, not defensive. I typed back quickly. "Yes, call me tomorrow evening. Send." I didn't know what that conversation would bring. Didn't know if it would lead to healing or just more disappointment. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I didn't need his approval to be whole. Didn't need his apology to move forward with my life. Didn't need him to understand in order to know I'd done the right thing. I'd chosen myself. I'd drawn a line. I'd walked away from a situation that was hurting me. And whether he met me on the other side of that line or not, I would be okay. Because for the first time in years, I had a life that was mine, a home that was mine, a future that wasn't tied to someone else's needs or demands or crumbs of affection. I had myself back. And that was worth more than any house, any relationship, any version of family that required me to be small. A year later, I stood in Lydia's kitchen on Christmas morning, watching snow fall softly against the window. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey. Someone had put on Christmas music, the old classics I'd grown up with, and I could hear my grandchildren laughing in the living room. Lydia came up beside me, handing me a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Good," I said, and I meant it. She studied my face for a moment, then smiled. "You look different than you did last Christmas." I am different. Last Christmas, I'd stood in someone else's kitchen, cooking for people who took me for granted. I'd sat at a table waiting for my name to be called, only to be reminded I didn't matter enough for a $5 candle. This Christmas, I was here because I was wanted, not needed, not useful, just wanted. "Mom, come in here," Lydia's son called from the living room. "We're about to open presents." I set down my coffee and walked into a room full of warmth. The tree was smaller than the one at Nate and Kim's house had been, but it was covered in homemade ornaments and strings of popcorn the kids had made themselves. Lydia's husband was on the floor, helping the youngest untangle a ribbon. My granddaughter was arranging presents into piles, organizing them by person with the seriousness of a wedding planner. "Grandma, sit here," she said, patting the spot next to her on the couch. "You get to open yours first." "Oh, I can wait," I started to say, but Lydia shook her head. "Nope, house rules. Grandma goes first." She handed me a small package, wrapped in paper the kids had clearly decorated themselves, covered in crayon drawings of mountains and hearts. I unwrapped it carefully, not wanting to tear the paper they'd worked so hard on. Inside was a photo frame they'd made, decorated with painted handprints and glitter. The photo was from a few months ago, all of us at a park near my cottage, grinning at the camera. "So you can remember us when we're not there," my grandson said, seriously. "I could never forget you," I said, my voice thick. "This is beautiful. Thank you." They beamed, then immediately moved on to the next present, their excitement infectious. As the morning went on, I watched the easy rhythm of this family. The way Lydia's husband helped clean up wrapping paper without being asked. The way the kids shared their new toys without keeping score. The way Lydia made sure everyone had what they needed without turning herself into unpaid staff. No one was performing for social media. No one was handing out gifts to prove how generous they were. No one was keeping track of who got what or making sure everyone saw how blessed they were. It was just family. Imperfect, genuine, real. Around noon, Lydia started pulling out ingredients for dinner. "Mom, why don't you sit down and relax?" she said when I moved to help. "You're our guest." "I don't mind helping," I said. "You know I love cooking." "I know you do, and if you want to make your sweet potatoes, I'd be thrilled. But you're doing it because you want to, not because anyone expects it. Deal?" "Deal." I made my sweet potatoes the way I always had, with brown sugar and pecans and a pinch of cinnamon. But this time, when they came out of the oven, Lydia insisted I sit down while she finished everything else. "You've done your part," she said firmly. "Now let us take care of you." It felt strange, being taken care of. I'd spent so many years being the one who served, who anticipated needs, who made sure everyone else was comfortable. But it also felt good. Later, someone stuck a paper crown on my head, the kind that comes out of Christmas crackers. My youngest granddaughter giggled and declared me the Queen of Christmas. "I like the sound of that," I said, adjusting the crown. Lydia pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. Me on the couch, surrounded by grandchildren, a plate of pie balanced on my lap, wearing that ridiculous paper crown with a genuine smile on my face. "Perfect," she said, showing me the picture. "I'm sending this to you." My phone buzzed in my pocket a moment later. I looked at the photo for a long time. The woman in that picture looked happy, relaxed, at peace. She looked like someone who knew her worth. As the afternoon wore on and the kids settled in with their new toys, Lydia and I sat together in the quiet kitchen, sipping coffee. "Have you talked to Nate lately?" she asked carefully. I nodded. "He called a few weeks ago, just to check in. It was awkward, but it was honest. More honest than we've been in years." "Did he apologize?" "Eventually. It took a while for him to really understand what he was apologizing for. At first, it was just, 'Sorry you're upset.' But we kept talking, and I think he's starting to see it. What they did, how long it went on. And Kim? She's still angry from what I can tell. Nate says she thinks I overreacted, that I could have just talked to them instead of selling the house. But that's her process. I can't control how she feels about it." "Do you think you'll ever have a real relationship with them again?" I thought about that. Maybe, someday, but it won't look like it did before. They downsized to a rental across town. Their social circle changed when people found out what happened. Some sided with them, some with me. Nate's learning what it's like to actually budget. To live within his means. I think it's been good for him, even though he'd never admit it. "And the kids? Do you see them?" "Once a month or so. Nate brings them by my cottage. We have lunch, we play games. It's still a little strained, but it's real. No one's pretending everything is fine. We're just trying to figure out what comes next." Lydia squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom, for standing up for yourself, for not backing down. It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I admitted. Walking away from my own son, letting that house go, knowing people would judge me. "But you'd do it again, wouldn't you?" I looked out at the living room, at my grandchildren playing peacefully, at the life I'd built for myself this past year. "Yes," I said, "I would. Because here's what I've learned. Family who treats you like background noise at your own table is not everything. Family who laughs while you hurt and expects you to keep smiling is not everything. Family who only remembers you exist when they need money or favors, or someone to blame, is not everything. Real family, the kind worth keeping, sees you, respects you, values you for who you are, not what you can provide. And sometimes, the most powerful thing an older woman can do is not make a scene. It's not a dramatic speech in the middle of dinner. It's a quiet, all right, a signed letter, a door that stays closed to people who only knock when they need something. It's choosing yourself when everyone expects you to keep choosing them. 4 days after Christmas last year, my son and his wife stood outside my door, pounding and begging, panicked that the ground beneath them was finally shifting. They thought I'd ruined their lives. All I'd really done was stop letting them ruin mine. I gave them back the same empty space they'd been giving me for years, and I walked away to build a life where I mattered. Not as a wallet, not as a convenience, not as someone who could be humiliated and dismissed, but as a person, as Carolyn, as me. Now let me ask you something, because I know many of you watching this have been in similar situations. Maybe not exactly like mine, but close enough to feel it in your bones. If you were in my place, would you have kept funding that house for a son who treated you like you were invisible? Would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace? Even though the peace was only peaceful for everyone else? Or would you have done what I did and finally chosen yourself? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Tell me your story. Tell me if you've ever had to draw a line with family, and what happened when you did. And if this story resonated with you, if you felt seen or understood or less alone, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Because stories like these need to be told. Older women need to know they're not crazy for wanting respect. They're not selfish for having boundaries. They're not cruel for refusing to be used. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your mother, your aunt, your friend who's been struggling with the same thing. Because the truth is, you teach people how to treat you. And sometimes, the best lesson you can give is showing them what happens when you finally stop accepting less than you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you're never too old to start over. You're never too old to choose yourself.